Broadcast Day and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private and not-for-profit organization. As always, please stay with us. Our Reading the Buffalo News is coming up next, and feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, or questions.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Friday, August 21st of 2026. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and J.J. Patek. And we'll open with the weather. It's a gorgeous day outside. It's not hot for a change. We have a mostly sunny day today with a high of 80 and a partly cloudy tonight with a low of 60 with a thunderstorm probable tomorrow with a high of 80 and a low of 62. That'll be a thunderstorm in the afternoon. And then Sunday we'll have a shower and a thunderstorm with a high of 71 and a low of 76. Monday, a couple of showers with a high of 70 and a low of 55. That's cool. And then Tuesday, partly sunny and pleasant with a high of 72 and a low of 57. Wednesday will be nice with clouds and sun with a high of 75 and a low of 61. And Thursday we'll have rain tapering to showers with a high of 78 and a low of 58. And for the area almanac, yesterday's high was 75 and the low was 60. The normal high is 79, a normal low is 61. The record high was 90 degrees back in 1959, and the record low was 47 in 2000. Last year's high was 68 degrees, and the low was 59. The national extremes for the 48 contiguous states, the high was in Chickasha, Oklahoma, with 109 degrees. And the low was in Stanley, Idaho, with 36 degrees. And today we have a possibility of 13 hours and 41 minutes of sunshine. So we can't complain about that too much. The sun rose this morning at 6:28 a.m. It will set tonight at 8:09 p.m. The moon will rise at 4:18 p.m. and there's not going to be a moonset. So, and we do have a trivia question. I looked at this before and got it wrong. What is the hottest place on Earth? I thought it was in Chile, and it's not. It's in Dalol, Ethiopia, which has a mean annual temperature of 94 degrees Fahrenheit. But down there in Chile, they do get colder air because they're up in the mountains.
Well, I think I'll stay here in Buffalo, thank you.
Buffalo is a fine place to be.
Turning to the front page of today's Buffalo News, our lead story is headlined, Harassment Allegations Against Hawkins Called Unsubstantiated. Did Buffalo School Board member Louis Mucky Hawkins sexually harass Buffalo Public Schools employees? According to an investigative summary released to the Buffalo School Board on Wednesday night, accusations levied by 3 district employees against Hawkins were, quote, unsubstantiated, Board President Kathy Evans Brown told the public. That report means his position on the board is likely safe, but the matter is not fully over. Hawkins' conduct since joining the board in January is also under scrutiny in 2 legal notice files of claim filed in the past 5 weeks by district administrators Antoinette Amos and Angel Adams. On Thursday, legal representatives for the district employees said the news of Wednesday's findings has no direct impact and will not deter their legal pursuits. Hawkins spoke briefly with the media as he departed the auditorium stage at Buffalo Academy for Visual and Performing Arts. I'm just happy the truth was found, he said. A few moments earlier, Evans Brown shared a summary of an independent investigation the board commissioned on June 17th when it identified Hodgson Russ LLP to lead an effort to see if Hawkins' actions toward 3 Buffalo Schools employees constituted sexual harassment. There are no substantiated evidence of a violation of law or policy with regard to any allegations of sexual harassment or retaliations, Evans Brown said, referring to the report shared in executive session by Hodgson Russ partner Louisa Bostic. Hawkins said he was grateful to the community for members who supported him during the investigation amid an avalanche of media coverage and calls for his resignation. "My community is what made me, so I let them speak for me," Hawkins said. "I appreciate that." Because the accusations were not substantiated, the board took no action involving Hawkins, who has continued in his usual role as a board member as the investigation proceeded. However, Hawkins is still mentioned in 2 notices of claim by Amos and Adams that were filed by the Forrestal law firm and the law offices of John B. Elmore. Notices of claim are precursors to a lawsuit and would not be affected directly by the results of the board-commissioned investigation. The firms of Forrestal and Elmore issued a joint statement on Thursday explaining the differences between their ongoing effort and the conclusions of the Hodgson-Russ report. "Our legal system does not resolve claims through a privately retained report," their statement said. It resolves them through a process in which both sides exchange evidence, documents, testimony, and every other form of tangible and verbal information under oath, subject to challenge and ultimately tested before a neutral trier of fact. JJ?
Thank you. As the state takes over the stadium, Hochul pledges vigilance. This is from Mike Petro. Erie County considered itself a hands-on leaseholder for the Buffalo Bills Stadium during its decades-long relationship with the team. As the state officially takes the reins of the lease for the new $2.2 billion stadium, Governor Kathy Hochul says she is unwilling to let anything slip, even if the stadium is not quite as much in the state's backyard as it was in the county's. Erie County transferred the entire Bills Stadium campus earlier this month, ending in a more than 5-decade run as a stadium leaseholder. The leverage, control, and decision-making authority the county used to wield over stadium operations will be considerably diminished. Much of it now goes over to the state. The stadium needs to do well, Hochul said last week during a meeting with reporters and editors at the Buffalo News. Hochul plans to keep the Stadium Commission, the Erie County Stadium Corporation, activated to serve as her eyes and ears for what's happening at the new building. The state entity overseeing the stadium operations and management will provide regular reports and make sure maintenance of the building is a top priority. She says she doesn't want to see any situation with the Bills get as dire as it was about 5 years ago when she took office as governor. The situation had declined so badly that at one point the Bills were saying that the stadium needed to be rebuilt or replaced, or the team would have to leave Western New York, she said. Hochul entered formal negotiations for a new stadium in May of 2021 and said she took them very seriously because the team had other options. As part of the agreement, the state agreed to take on the lease at the Orchard Park Stadium. "We want to be very involved," Hochul said. "I don't want to get to a point where there is such pressure because things are falling apart and the team has to go. Let's be smart about it throughout the process so that I will be very engaged. Our fans will not know the difference. They will not feel it. They will not be affected." Part of the process of being active and involved leaseholders is making sure infrastructure and maintenance are priorities as the stadium begins to age. The state will provide $280 million, and the county will provide an estimated $120 million over the course of the 30-year lease to repair and maintain the new stadium. The county is making sure it has money earmarked for infrastructure needs by collecting a 6% surcharge on products bought at the new stadium. Some fans were surprised when they attended their first practice of the preseason at the stadium and purchased concessions or merchandise, only to see the extra 6% surcharge on top of the 8.75% sales tax applied to purchases in the county. But that surcharge has been in the plan since the state, county, and Bills struck a deal to build the stadium in 2023. It was agreed that the 6% surcharge would be used for a fund that will go to maintenance and infrastructure of the stadium. The county's commitment is based solely on revenue generated from the surcharge on sales at the stadium, and with the surcharge, the county will no longer have to spend taxpayer money on stadium upkeep as it did at the old Highmark Stadium. Stadium maintenance funds used to be borne by all local taxpayers, even if they never stepped into the stadium. but this will serve as more of a tax on the people benefiting from the stadium and attending games, Hochul said. The state does not have a similar mechanism in place for raising future funds for the stadium, but will make sure to come up with the money instead of making it a line item in the state budget. The new stadium will have a capital improvement fund and maintenance and repair fund, which will be funded annually for up to 15 years. Those costs could increase with inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, capped at 2.2% annually. And in 1 year of the new lease, which is expected to be in 2026, or year one of the new lease, total payments to the Capital Improvement Fund would be $10.9 million, while total funding to the Repair and Maintenance Fund would be about 6.7%.
Well, staying on the front page of today's Buffalo News, our next headline is Democrats moving to fortify polls amid, quote, a chaos moment. State Democratic officials are preparing for chaos at the polls this November as President Trump casts doubt on election security and pushes for more federal involvement in local voting. We're no longer talking about hypothetical situations, said Nick Brown, Washington State's Democratic Attorney General, noting the president's push to nationalize election administration and to question the integrity of upcoming elections. Brown is among the many Democrat state officials raising alarms over how Trump may seek to interfere with or challenge the results of November's midterms. At stake is not only whether Republicans will maintain their grip on Congress, but also control of state legislatures across the country. Democratic gains at either the state or national levels could provide a new check on Trump, who has sought to significantly expand executive power in his second term. State lawmakers have introduced new legislation this year with the aim of protecting polling places this November. And behind closed doors, Democratic attorneys general and local election officials have sought to anticipate and prepare for ways the federal government could interject itself into local elections. In recent months, Democratic attorneys general have been meeting to prepare for worst-case scenarios, including the possibility of federal immigration officers patrolling polling locations or the FBI visiting county election offices. Those AGs are gearing up to immediately fight potential intimidation or interference efforts in court, Brown said, and are working to educate local election administrators on the basics of election law. Absent some very unusual circumstances, you can't send the military to polling locations to just hang out. You can't do those things, Brown said. The White House did not respond to Stateline's questions. Republican state officials told Stateline, told Stateline they will respect voting laws and the outcomes of local races no matter how the president reacts. Some Republicans have opposed Trump's efforts to restrict mail-in voting and resisted requests for private voter data. Brown said he's less worried about a White House effort to cancel or attack the legitimacy of elections across the country. Rather, he fears a more targeted effort to interfere with or challenge results in a few states that could determine the balance of federal power. The president still refuses to acknowledge his 2020 electoral defeat, and Brown noted some fellow election deniers now hold power in state and local governments. At least 25 county election officials who align with the broader election denier movement have taken office across the country since the last federal election in 2024, according to a recent New York Times analysis. This is what worries me, is a half dozen local elected officials saying, I have doubts about the election because the president said there was something shady and I'm not going to certify it, Brown said. And we're just in a chaos moment, and I think that's a very real possibility. He added, the struggle I often have in this job, and particularly on this issue, is raising the alarm for people about these possibilities while not sounding like an alarmist, but I think we really need to in this circumstance. Utah Republican Governor Spencer Cox said elections have always had, quote, some issues, unquote, but he said there's no evidence of anything coming close to major voter violations of election laws in the recent past. He said he expected Republican and Democratic secretaries of state to continue their long tradition of conducting elections with integrity. I feel confident in the election system in this country, and I hope that politicians will be responsible, he said, that you win the right way, and there's a right way to lose too, and I hope we'll see more of that. Midterms generally favor the party that doesn't control the White House, but this cycle looks particularly competitive for Democrats as the president's popularity sinks and consumer angst grows high over high prices.
Thank you. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour, and we're going to move to the opinion pages. Buffalo Bills Connections. Taxpayers help finance a $2.2 billion stadiums, including $250 million from Erie County, so who gets access to the county suite matters. The policy governing Erie County's luxury suite in the new Highmark Stadium is designed to prevent it from becoming a taxpayer-funded perk for public officials. Earlier this month, County Executive Mark Poloncarz conducted a drawing in which 10 local charitable organizations won access to the county suite for one Buffalo Bills game this season. The county received the suite in connection with the $250 billion contribution to the stadium. County legislators debated how to ensure this suite benefits the public rather than a handful of local lawmakers, as the News' Matthew Trumfio reported. Erie County legislator Taisha St. John Tard led the effort to develop the policy, which passed in May, and the provisions bar the suite from being used for political purposes or events, bar county officials from attending regular season games and postseason games in a suite unless they pay face value for a ticket, and establish a lottery system for awarding tickets. 3 economic agencies were automatically granted seats when the county passed the policy, Poloncarz said. The Erie County Industrial Development Agency, Visit Buffalo, and Empire State Development Corporation were chosen with the intent to give important economic development entities the opportunity to host business meetings that could benefit the county in the suite. Using the suite to attract employers or investment could constitute a legitimate public purpose, providing that use is transparent and genuinely related to economic development. Awarding seats by lottery to qualified applicants should provide the winning move to maintain the luxury amenity as the People's Suite. And then the Allen effect. Bills fans will be seeing plenty of Josh Allen even when he isn't on the field. Allen, one of the league's most active and popular brand pitchmen, will be one of the 3 players featured in a 30-second campaign spot from the New Era cap for the 2026 NFL Sidelines collection, as the News' Mike Petro reported. Allen's endorsement portfolio has made him one of the NFL's most visible pitchmen. Rochester-based Wegmans recently introduced Josh Allen Crunch Time cereal for a limited run. Darn it, and it doesn't have a gluten-free label on it, so I can't even try it.
Oh.
As in years past, $1 from every box sold will benefit Golisano Children's Hospital of Buffalo. The Patricia Allen Fund, named after the Bills quarterback's late grandmother, recently reached $17 million through 60,000 donations worldwide, nearly 6 years after its creation. Allen's national commercial profile reinforces Buffalo's visibility, while the charity efforts associated with his name continue to produce tangible benefits at home. And finally, history is preserved. Buffalo's football history also lives in a remarkable story of Janet Garrison, 90, whose family has held on to the football from the first official play at Rich Stadium. Garrison and her family cherished the football and would welcome the opportunity to see it displayed for the Bills community, but how the family came to possess it is even a richer story. The News' Ben Sugimoto retells for The Bright Side the remarkable path that brought Garrison from the Netherlands to the United States and eventually to Angola, where she settled with her husband Lee. Her husband and sons attended the first Rich Stadium game. Garrison later bought raffle tickets at the Evans Center Fire Hall, and her winning ticket was drawn on December 16th of 1973. The Garrison family has treasured the football for 53 years and would welcome seeing it displayed in an honor area. The Bills should take the family up on that interest. As a new era begins at Highmark Stadium, there should be room for a football that was there at the beginning of the last one. I never knew that. You learn something new every day.
Yes, you do. Well, next we have our Another Voice column, and today the topic is education, and the writer is Dr. Tony Vetrano. He is a medical director of Century Airport Pediatrics at OLV Human Services, and the headline on his article is Back to School Wellness Visits Are Crucial.
Yes.
He writes, as summer winds down, there's much to do as families prepare for another school year. But the first priority before that first day should be the child's annual physical. A yearly wellness visit is much more than measuring height and weight or checking hearing and vision. It's an opportunity to make sure children are healthy, developing appropriately, and ready to learn and grow. After 35 years as a pediatrician, I believe some of the most important work we do happens before a child is sick. Prevention allows us to identify concerns early and address them before they become larger. I've always viewed pediatric care as a partnership between medicine and parenting. During a wellness visit, we should be talking about sleep, nutrition, development, school performance, behavior, and mental health. That philosophy is also why I'm so excited about the next chapter for Century Airport Pediatrics. Our practice has officially become part of the OLV Human Services, expanding OLV into pediatric services and creating a seamless continuum of care for children and families. For many organizations, pediatric care and behavioral health exist in separate worlds. OLV is bringing them together. A child who comes in for an annual wellness exam should have developmental concerns identified early and, if needed, receive access to developmental screenings, autism evaluations, behavioral health report, mental health services, and dental care within one integrated system. When those developmental services are connected to pediatric care, families receive the support they need without navigating a maze of disconnected providers. The goal is continuity. As children head back to school, I encourage parents to use their annual medical visit as an opportunity for a broader conversation about their child's mental, behavioral health, and well-being. Our responsibility is not simply to care for children when they're sick, it is to help them stay healthy, identify concerns early, and give families the tools and support they need. That is the vision behind the next chapter of Airport Century Pediatrics and OLV Human Services, caring for the whole child, supporting the whole family, and helping Western New York's children grow, learn, and thrive.
Well, that's a good,
Yes.
very good. I like that. And we're going to have a look here. Where am I? I got lost.
We're up to the political cartoon.
I am up at the political cartoons. There I am. I'm in the right place here. Okay. The first one we have is from Adam Ziglas. And we have a podium. It says the Mickey Mouse Club on top. And Mickey Mouse is standing up on top of this podium. And it's labeled the Disney sues FCC. And he's got a flag that says, "We the People, First Amendment." And on the one side there is universalism artists and journalists and doing their thing, and on the other side we have writers and comedians and cartoons and other people, and they are all trying to retain their right of expression from the looks of it. And then on the other side we have Steve Kelly from Creators Syndicate, and there's a man sitting at a desk looking at his computer doing some work, and his wife standing behind him, and he's saying, "Ever since they went woke, I've wanted to sell our shares and cut our losses. What do you think?" And his wife is holding a piece of, or a newspaper in her hand labeled "The Nike Stock Collapse," and she says, "Just do it." Draw conclusions as you will.
I guess so. Well, next we turn to the opinion columns, and our first one comes from Joel Battenfled, and he writes for the Boston Herald. His headline is Trump 2.0 winding down a little bit early? The abrupt departure of longtime loyal White House Secretary Caroline Leavitt could mean Trump 2.0 is winding down, burdened by the Iran war and the rough economy, and looking to transition to J.D. Vance after the potentially disastrous midterms. The Republican president looks increasingly tired and running out of steam, has not introduced any major new initiatives, and could see the political writing on the wall. The 80-year-old Trump could even be looking for a way out if Democrats take control of Congress, giving the vice president 2 years to ramp up for 2028. Vance has been playing up to MAGA lately, going hard on immigration and confronting reporters in similar fashion to his boss. That was a doozy, Vance told a reporter in the White House press room, who he criticized for giving a speech masquerading as a question. The vice president also has taken the lead on defending the Trump administration's immigration policies and aggressive use of ICE to deport non-citizens. Trump has kept up an amazing nonstop pace since winning in 2024, but how long can he do that? The midterm results so far show that Trump's power is waning in the Republican Party, with several of his endorsed candidates like My Pillow Man Mike Lindell losing badly. The war against Iran, which now seems bogged down, has taken a major toll on the president, both politically and personally. Trump is now looking for a way out of the quagmire. Pete Hegseth is a joke and should not be Secretary of War, despite Trump's stubborn insistence that he stay in that important role. Leavitt's surprise departure has triggered speculation about her reasons for leaving, which could include more than just her stated reason of wanting to spend more time with her children. She has a bright future, either as a future candidate for office or as a cabinet secretary in a Republican administration. She could also see that the Trump administration is spiraling down, facing a possible long and nasty impeachment process after the midterms. She may have become angered at being left in the decoy Air Force One during the catering truck escapade. Or is it possible she realizes that Vance wants his own person in the White House press office? Just days after Leavitt announced she was quitting, a key Vance person at the White House, Deputy National Security Advisor Andy Baker, said he would be leaving his post in the coming weeks. The departures could mean Trump is shaking up his administration, but more likely, they indicate dissatisfaction with the way things are going in the White House. Trump reportedly told supporters a few weeks ago to get behind Vance, but shortly after denied the report, said he wasn't taking sides. Marco Rubio has emerged as a major force in Trump's second term, serving as Secretary of State at a time when the U.S. was at war with Iran and trying to negotiate an end to the Israel-Hamas war. Polls show Republican voters are currently about evenly split over who they would back in 2028, with Vance holding just a small lead over Rubio. JJ?
Well, that was rather interesting. From Solomon D. Stevens, we have this. Will cynicism keep us from recognizing our next statement? As people, have we become too cynical for our own good? We live in an age where we routinely assume that all politicians have the worst motives and they are driven by self-interest and that they are dishonest and or corrupt. It's our default attitude. We are not always wrong. There are certainly politicians like this, but not everyone in politics has such low motives. We shouldn't be naive, of course, but our extreme cynicism hurts us in the end. More importantly, it can keep us from recognizing statesmanship when it appears. Why are we so cynical? Well, clearly, part of the reason is that President Trump has for years been telling us that the political system is rigged, judges are partisans, and the media are fatally biased, and everyone who disagrees with him is an enemy of the people. Can't blame it all our cynicism on Trump. It was here when he arrived on a political scene. Social media also plays a major role in promoting cynicism. The turning point in America, the moment when cynicism became respectable and even admired, was 1913, when Charles Beard's An Economic Interpretation of the Constitution was published. Beard argued that our founders were not men of principle doing their best in an imperfect world to fashion a great constitution. Rather, they were narrow, self-interested politicians hoping to consolidate their wealth. His book had an enormous effect on how politics is viewed in America, despite historians showing that his methods were shoddy and his conclusions incorrect. The damage to the public psyche was done. In spite of scholarly rejection of Beard's analysis, his cynical view survived. Beard invited us to think poorly about our founders, and we accepted his invitation. The problem is that cynicism closes our minds. As Alain von Heel and his colleagues pointed out in Advances in Political Psychology, politically cynical people show low trust, and they generally have active, overt, negative feelings toward and negative expectations about the intentions and actions of politicians. If we continue to embrace cynicism, political polarization will increase and it will become increasingly more difficult to find a way through our current political challenges. If we really believe that everyone is out for himself, then social trust and respect for the law disappear. We are left with political nihilism, and we will turn our backs on true statesmen when they emerge, and they will. Well, what are statesmen? This traditional term is those rare public officials who transcend the ordinary in politics. Most people get involved in politics because of their love of power, status, and the benefits they can accrue on their positions. From time to time, a truly great person emerges and casts political life into a new light in the pursuit of the common good. Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill come to mind. They were not perfect people, and they had their own flaws and even their demons. However, they were remarkable human beings. They each sought to reframe their nation's common understanding of the challenges they faced. Lincoln, by turning to the Declaration of Independence to confront the evil of slavery, and Churchill by turning to his deep understanding of the history to rally his country to stand up to Nazism. Much of their contribution was in promoting and explaining fundamental ideas to the average person. Statesmen also have the ability to understand not only what is best for the nation, but at the same time to know that the best can never be achieved. They seek only the best possible. This means that statesmen do not shun compromise with opponents. This is not a sign of weakness or lack of principle. It's an indication that they understand that the perfect is the enemy of the good. They have both moral clarity and political flexibility. We need to transcend thoughtless cynicism and embrace what I would call mature optimism, which means that our eyes are open to the low motives of most politicians, but that we also know that some men and women can offer more. We need to think critically, not cynically. If we don't believe that statesmanship is possible, we won't welcome it when it appears. We can't allow extreme cynicism to determine our future. We deserve better than that.
You're
Amen.
listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 32 minutes past the hour. In national news, the headline is, U.S. to put toughest sanctions in history on Iran, Bessent says. The U.S. will impose the toughest sanctions in history on Iran, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, saying on Thursday that a focus on economic measures he suggested would lessen the need for new major military operations against Tehran. His statement followed President Trump's threat a day earlier of economic warfare and warning of economic consequences against any country that provided any type of lifeline to Iran. Oil prices rose to more than a 3-week high on Thursday following those U.S. threats of financial penalties aimed at forcing an end to the nearly 6-month-old war that has stranded millions of barrels of Middle Eastern oil. I'm not sure why oil has popped up on this, Bessent told CNBC. If we're doing the maximum economic pressure, excuse me, I'm not sure why oil has popped up on this, Bessent told CNBC. If we're doing the maximum economic pressure, then that means that likely there will not be an at-large kinetic restart, he said, using a term referring to military force. Thousands have been killed in the conflict, which drew in the Gulf nations and shocked markets as Iran flexed its ability to curb shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway that carries about a fifth of all traded oil before February. The U.S. and Iran have twice announced ceasefire deals in April and June, aiming to restore the free flow of shipping through the Hormuz on a path towards ending the conflict, but both quickly crumbled. Before Bessent spoke, Iran's foreign ministry said it condemned U.S. economic and trade sanctions, calling them economic terrorism that would target ordinary Iranians and amount to crimes against humanity. Bessent told CNBC he would share more details and talk about exactly what we're going to do on Iran at a press conference later on today.
Thank you. And we're moving on to something with national news with medicine. Melanoma therapy could spur a wave of cancer vaccines. This is from Julie Steenhuisen of Reuters. Merck and Moderna's success with a personalized cancer vaccine designed to keep melanoma at bay opens a new avenue of treatment that doctors hope will work against many types of tumors. Unlike chemotherapy, which kills both healthy and cancerous cells, or immunotherapy, which revs up the immune system, personalized cancer vaccines train the immune system to specifically target mutations found only on a person's tumor. Merck and Moderna said on Wednesday that their vaccine helped prevent the return and spread of disease in a large trial involving more than 1,000 melanoma patients. They had localized tumors that were removed surgically but had a high risk of recurrence. Moderna expects that thousands of melanoma patients could benefit within the first few years of approval. It's a big deal for the field in general, said Dr. Ryan Sullivan, director of the Center for Melanoma at Mass General Brigham Cancer Institute. With this positive study, there is hope and likely investment to follow that these approaches may change the way we treat cancer more broadly. The trial result is a monumental leap forward, validating mRNA technology as a cancer treatment, said Dr. Julie Graulo, Chief Medical Officer of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. Beyond melanoma, personalized cancer vaccines are in late-stage development for a host of tumor types. Merck and Moderna have several large trials underway in non-small cell lung cancers that have been surgically removed. They're also studying the combination in mid-stage trials in patients with bladder and kidney cancers, as well as early-stage trials in pancreatic and stomach cancers, with numerous trial results expected in the next year or two, Moderna President Steve Hoge told Reuters. Roche and BioNTech, whose mRNA technology was used in the Pfizer COVID vaccines, are testing a similar treatment called autogene cevumeran in mid-stage studies in colon and pancreatic cancer patients who have undergone surgery. Results of the colon cancer trial are expected in 2027, with pancreatic trial results to follow in 2031. We should be hearing results from multiple studies over the next few years, and there's every reason to hope now, with this news, that many of them will be positive, said Dr. Robert van der Heijden, director of the Penn Medicine's Abramson Cancer Center and president-elect of the American Association for Cancer Research. Merck and Moderna's treatment, known as intismeran autogene, involves activating the immune system with up to 9 doses of Merck's immunotherapy drug Keytruda, infused every 6 weeks, plus up to 9 doses of a customized mRNA vaccine that instructs the immune system to attack the patient's specific cancer cells. Oh, that sounds good. When used alone after surgery to reduce the risk that melanoma returns, Keytruda is given every 3 to 6 weeks for up to a year. In melanoma patients, Keytruda treatment can result in fatigue, diarrhea, rash, and inflammation of the joints and muscles, as well as that of healthy organs in some cases. The company said they saw no new side effects with the addition of the vaccine. The trial is ongoing and the companies have not released full results. They will continue to follow volunteers to determine whether the drug extends overall survival. 5-year data from previous mid-stage trial presented in June showed the vaccine had cut the risk that cancer would return by half and reduced the risk that it would spread to new locations by 59% compared with Keytruda alone. After that trial, the addition of an mRNA vaccine also showed no increase in the rates of serious side effects. What we saw in the mid-stage trial were the kinds of reactions people were having when they got a flu or COVID shot or any other vaccine, Hoge said. Dr. Elizabeth Buchbinder, a melanoma specialist at Mass General Brigham Cancer Institute, said doctors treating patients whose cancer had been surgically removed often weigh the benefits of treating with Keytruda against the risk of the side effects, especially for patients with only a 20% risk of cancer recurrence. The added benefit of the vaccine, however, may change that math, she said. Buchbinder said a key reason to select melanoma by test in combination with Keytruda was that it is a tumor that produces a lot of mutations, making it easier for the immune system to spot. Many other cancer types also produce multiple mutations, she said, suggesting it may have broad applicability. We'll see, but it's definitely an area that's going to be exploding, especially with these results coming out, she said. Well, I like that.
Yeah.
I just see they didn't mention liver cancer, but that's the first thing that popped up. By the time they find it, it's usually too late.
Yeah. Well, our next story, Jennings is an early favorite to replace Leavitt. Scott Jennings has emerged as an early favorite for the next White House press secretary, multiple sources familiar with the matter told CNN, though all stressed that the process is far from complete. Chief of Staff Susie Wiles recently met with Jennings, who is a CNN contributor in Washington, at the request of the White House, two sources familiar with the meeting said, and multiple staffers believe he has her backing. He's competent and good on TV, one senior White House official said of why Wiles had shown interest in Jennings, a longtime advisor to Senator Mitch McConnell, who also served in the George W. Bush administration. The longtime GOP strategist is one of just a few candidates who has piqued the interest of the White House, and one source said Wiles plans to meet with several other potential contenders before making any decisions. With Caroline Leavitt's departure at the end of the month and the midterms less than 3 months away, the White House is facing a critical vacancy, but officials have stressed that they're not rushing the process. And another White House official pushed back on the idea that Wiles is backing anyone at this point, saying the Chief of Staff will take her time to find the right fit. Wiles is looking for a, quote, grown-up, unquote, who understands how the job works and can maintain a level of professionalism as the face of the administration, two sources said. President Trump has also told his team that he's happy to take his time weighing his options and isn't in a rush to make a decision, officials said. He's relying again on a rotating cast of cabinet officials to handle press briefings for an indefinite period, CNN previously reported. Still, chatter about Jennings has grown in recent days. Asked by CNN's Abby Phillip if he was interviewing for the job, Jennings demurred on Wednesday. I don't have any comment about that, he said on Newsnight, while appearing to use the opportunity to show he understands the importance of the role. I think every president deserves a good, solid defense and someone who can go out there and explain what they're doing because the government's doing so much, Jennings said. The American people deserve somebody to go out there and tell them what's going on with their president and with the government as much as they can. And that job is a conduit to the transparency in front of the camera and also behind the scenes, and that's an important part. Jennings refused to say if he's been in communication with the White House about the job specifically or if he would take the job if offered. One source insisted that he is not gunning for the job, pointing to the fact that the political operative lives in Kentucky with his 4 school-aged children. A big part of the ongoing conversations over who should replace Leavitt is finding someone who can work closely with reporters behind the scenes, in addition to being an attack dog for Trump at the podium. Leavitt is part of a small group of advisors whom the president trusts and listens to. Leavitt is part of a small group of advisors whom the president trusts and listens to, and the team would like her replacement to be similarly positioned. Leavitt, for example, regularly weighs in during private meetings with Trump, including on issues outside the scope of communications. And some officials have raised concerns that selecting a person like Jennings, who Trump has said looks the part and handles himself well on television, may serve primarily as a public face for messaging. Can he do all the closed-door legwork that has made Caroline so effective? No one knows, one Trump advisor told CNN.
Thank you. And from the U.S. economy, the jobless application drop. This is from Reuters. The number of Americans filing claims for unemployment benefits slipped last week, suggesting the labor market remains stable despite a surprising drop in employment in July and leaving the Federal Reserve in position to keep its focus on containing inflation. Initial claims for state unemployment benefits fell 6,000 to a seasonally adjusted 206,000 for the week that ended Saturday from the prior week's upward revised 212,000, the Labor Department said on Thursday. Economists polled by Reuters predicted 210,000 claims for the latest week. Some economics expected an uptick in claims from states affected hardest by recent wildfires, such as Oregon and Washington, but the report showed no evidence of that. Advanced measures of new claims in both states fell last week. Jobless benefits of claims appeared for now to be anchored in the lower end of their 189,000 to 230,000 range for this year, indicating that layoffs remain low even if hiring is soft. The latest level is notably lower than it was this time in each of the past 3 years, emblematic of a low hire, low fire job market. While the U.S. sheds 23,000 jobs in July, the loss was centered in local government education. The private sector added 30,000 jobs, and an aging population driving a wave of retirement in President Donald Trump's immigration policies are shrinking the size of the workforce and allowing a lower level of job creation to keep the unemployment rate steady. The U.S. jobless rate of 4.1% remains near historically low levels. Demand for workers remains soft, but the supply of workers has slowed even more, leaving the labor market roughly in balance, Matthew Martin, senior U.S. economist at Oxford Economics, said. Thursday's report covers the survey week for the employment report for August. While it was 17,000 higher than the same week for July, it was the lowest level of new claims since 1969. Economists saw little to be concerned about from the latest data. Despite the favorable comparison, July payrolls fell, Jefferies chief U.S. economics Thomas Simon said. Suffice to say, using claims to foretell payrolls has been fairly unsuccessful for a while now, and that's not likely to change this month. The labor market stability, together with signs of mild inflation, if sustained, could allow the Fed to keep interest rates unchanged in September. That remains the current market expectation, despite inflation still running above the Fed's 2% target for 5 years.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. And our first is Charles Endress, who passed away on August 4th at his home in Olympia, Washington. Ronald A. Learn, otherwise nicknamed Ripper. Pamela K. Benz, née Waterman. Janet L. Fowler. Gail M. Kennison. Anna Schweck, née Garega. And Marguerite Wilhelm, née Horde. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
And now we'll move on to a little bit of entertainment with Georgia Nichols and the Royal Stars. Happy birthday for Friday, August 21st of 2026. And she says you're resourceful, pragmatic, and imaginative. You're also realistic and driven to achieve your goals. This is the perfect year to kick back and relax. The stars show what kind of a day you'll have. 5 being dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. And looks like everybody's got a lot of stars today. Aries has 4 of them. You might make practical plans related to law, medicine, higher education, or publishing. Yet you feel playful even though relations with someone close to you might be strained. Tonight, learn something. Taurus is 3 stars. Even though relations with coworkers might be cool today, discussions about finances, money, debt, and how to cover expenses at home will go well. Tonight, check your finances. Gemini, 3 stars. This is an excellent day to talk to others. Someone older or wiser might have something to contribute tonight. Be friendly. Cancer, 3 stars. It might be in your best interest to listen to the advice of parents, bosses, teachers, or the police. In fact, it might benefit your job as well as your earnings now or in the future. Tonight, work. Leo is 4 stars. Social outings and time spent with kids as well as romantic get-togethers can be enjoyable. You might learn something valuable and helpful tonight. Socialize. Virgo is 3 stars. Although you might have financial worries today or feel pinched in the money department, family relations are warm. In fact, you might be encouraged by the offer of help in practical or monetary terms that can come your way. Tonight, relax at home. Libra, 4 stars. You'll enjoy talking to others, especially siblings, relatives, and neighbors. Groups will be supportive. However, you might feel disappointed in unloved in a close relationship, and a parent or with a partner or marriage. Tonight, conversation. Scorpio, 3 stars. This is an excellent day for financial decisions and discussions with bosses and authority figures about your job, even your health. Someone behind the scenes might be critical. Tonight, check your money. Sagittarius, 4 stars. Your confidence is boosted today, but you're also cautious and practical. Don't worry if things are strained with a friend or member of a group. Tonight, you're strong. Capricorn, 3 stars. Because relations with a parent, boss, or someone in authority might be strained today, your impulse might be to pull back and hide somewhere, preferably with some food. That sounds like something I might enjoy. That's a wonderful guilty pleasure. I vote for ice cream. I think this is a good idea. Wow. Tonight, enjoy privacy. All right, let's all go out for ice cream. Aquarius, 4 stars. Friendships are warm and supported today. Some are upbeat and jubilant. Others are steady, practical, and beneficial. Enjoy making plans and goals with someone today. Tonight, be modest. That was an opening for another ice cream comment. And finally, Pisces. Many issues related to your job and your work are rewarding right now. In fact, many of you are in a new job feeling fulfillment from your work, which is a wonderful thing. Tonight, you look good to others, especially if you're carrying an ice cream cone.
Well, now it's time to jump into the time machine and look back at today in history for Friday, August 21st. In 1831, enslaved minister Nat Turner began the deadliest slave revolt in the United States. The rebellion killed 60 people and required a 3,000-man militia to stop it. In 1858, Illinois Senate candidates Stephen A. Douglas and Abraham Lincoln began the first of 7 debates. They focused largely on the extension of slavery into the central and midwestern and the western territories, an issue with importance far beyond Illinois. Douglas called Lincoln a dangerous radical, while Lincoln said slavery was a moral wrong. In 1897, on August 10th, German chemist Felix Hoffmann first synthesized aspirin. On this day, he resynthesized heroin for Bayer, with the 2 compounds having a profound and profoundly different effects on society. In 1911, a man stole the Mona Lisa by taking it off the wall and tucking it under his clothes.
Wow.
The painting was not recovered for 2 years, and the media sensation made the work famous. In 1912, Arthur R. Eldred of Oceanside, New York, became the first person to earn the rank of Eagle Scout. And in 1959, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a proclamation admitting Hawaii as the 50th state. And then in 2017, the continental United States experienced a total solar eclipse for the first time in almost 40 years.
Yeah. And I'm trying not to think about ice cream. We have from the Nation of the World, we call this article The Digest. A teen girl drops the case against social media. A teen girl whose lawsuit was a test case in litigation accusing social media companies of deliberately addicting young people and fueling a mental health crisis dropped her claims against the owners of Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Snapchat on Thursday, according to a court filing. The plaintiff, a 15-year-old girl from New Jersey identified in California court records as PM-Y, alleged the platform's owners, Meta Platforms, Google, and Snap Incorporated, contribute to her social media addiction, depression, and self-harm. The company says she dropped her claims without any payment. TikTok, which was also a defendant in her case, previously settled her claims. 15-year-old girl. FBI raided the D.C. home of former Representative Swalwell. The FBI raided a home belonging to former Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell, a prominent antagonist of President Donald Trump, before he resigned from Congress as part of an investigation into sexual misconduct claims against him, according to a source familiar with the investigation. FBI agents seized electronic devices from Swalwell at San Francisco International Airport and searched his home in Washington, D.C. last weekend, the source said. A lawyer for Swalwell did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Swalwell resigned his seat in Congress and dropped out of the race for California governor in April after 4 women accused him of sexual misconduct, and Swalwell apologized for mistakes in judgment but said the allegations were false. And briefly, South Korea, North Korea's Kim Yo-jong, sister of leader Kim Jong-un, said Thursday that South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's reaction to a U.S. move to reduce joint drills with Seoul amounted to double-dealing remarks that revealed uneasiness and impatience, KCNA reported. Lee said Wednesday on social media that he recognized President Donald Trump's will and efforts to create conditions for dialogue with North Korea. And about cyclosporiasis, Michigan's health department reported 14,277 cases linked to a cyclosporiasis outbreak on Thursday, up 368 from its updated week earlier, an increase of nearly 3%. Michigan is the hardest hit state in a multi-state outbreak of the parasitic illness. And for deportations, Guatemala received about 2,300 Mexicans deported from the U.S. in 2026. President Bernardo Arevalo said Wednesday, adding that they arrived alongside Guatemalans and were quickly transferred back to Mexico. And in France, French President Emmanuel Macron will host Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on August 23rd and 24th, with the two leaders expected to discuss tensions in the Middle East, Macron's office said on Thursday. And finally, we'll say Cuba. The U.S. imposed new gas Cuba-related sanctions Thursday. The sanctions targeted the leadership of the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People and designated 9 Cuban entities, including the Ministry of Construction of Cuba, for supporting the island nation's government. And
you're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Friday, August 21st on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
J.J. Patek
and Ed Howard.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
And we're back. We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ed Howard
and J.J. Patek. And we're into city and region with the story that will never go away from Patrick Lecomte. Trial opens for man accused in Pharaoh's witness death. Prosecutors began trying their case Thursday against Simon Gogolak, no longer accusing him of conspiring with a strip club owner and outlaws motorcycle club members to kill federal witness Crystal Quinn, but accusing him of a litany of other crimes in the months and days before she died in his home from an overdose. The 11 counts the Wellsville resident faces includes distribution of fentanyl resulting in Quinn's death. Prosecutors intend to prove Gogolak, 42, gave a lethal dose of fentanyl and heroin to the former Pharaoh's Gentlemen's Club employee and friend of strip club owner Peter Gerace Jr. It was his drugs that caused her to die in a puddle of blood and vomit in his bed, Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Cooper told jurors in his opening statement. "We don't know where the fatal drugs come from," replied court-appointed defense lawyer Nicholas Tuxedo in his opening statement. Tuxedo reminds jurors there's an entire story here you need to hear, including Quinn's drug addiction and prior attempts to get drugs from Gogolak before she traveled to his home and died on or just before August 1st of 2023. The government's case includes other counts that do not relate specifically to Quinn, including narcotics conspiracy, maintaining a drug-involved premises, kidnapping and possession of firearms in furtherance of drug trafficking. Prosecutors opened the case 2.5 years ago, believing Quinn, 37, was murdered to prevent her from testifying against Gerace, with her fentanyl death staged to look like an accidental overdose or suicide. Her death came about 3 months before she was expected to testify for the government in a bribery, drug, and sex trafficking trial against Gerace, owner of the now-closed Pharaoh's Gentlemen's Club in Cheektowaga. By the time she died, Quinn had already met with FBI agents and prosecutors at least 10 times after agreeing to cooperate in their investigation into Gerace and the Outlaws members. Her cooperation mattered, prosecutors say, because of what she told them about drug use, sex acts, and sexual exploitation at Pharaoh's. Gerace's relationship with Drug Enforcement Administration agent Joseph Bongiovanni, the identities of Outlaws members, and drug use at their clubhouse and Gerace's ties to the Outlaws. Her death amid the Gerace prosecution sparked an FBI investigation that prosecutors say revealed his other crimes. But in June, prosecutors asked Chief U.S. District Judge Elizabeth Wolfer to dismiss the tampering and retaliation charges against Gerace and Gogolak, saying they did not believe they could prove their guilt on those charges beyond a reasonable doubt, given Quinn's statements weeks before her death, along with her mental health and drug use history. The prosecutors say they also took into account the deaths of 2 witnesses who had communicated with Quinn, court rulings on the admissibility of statements, and new information evidence, all affecting the government's case. 2 other previously charged with witness retaliation, Outlaws Motorcycle Club leader John T. Tommy O. Ehrman and Howard Hinkle, Jr., who was among the last to be seen with Quinn, pleaded guilty in June to charges unrelated to the dead witness. Quinn's death in Gogolak's apartment finally came to light after her mother panicked, but unanswered text messages and phone calls to her daughter. Let's see if I can get this better. Quinn's death in Gogolak's apartment finally came to light after her mother panicked, but unanswered text messages and phone calls to her daughter, Cooper said on Thursday. In the summer of 2023, Gogolak and Crystal Quinn reconnected after not seeing each other for many years. On July 27th of 2023, Sharon Quinn of Depew had allowed Gogolak to borrow her car to drive himself and her daughter to Wellsville for a chance for her to get away and relax in the countryside during a stressful time in her life. That is a decision Sharon Quinn is going to regret for the rest of her life, Cooper said. On August 1st, a mother repeatedly called and texted her daughter because Crystal Quinn had an appointment with her lawyer to meet with federal authorities about that day about the Gerace case. "You're really scaring me," Sharon Quinn said one answered message to her daughter, according to Cooper. "Do I need to send the police?" the mother asked in another message. Then the mother started calling Gogolak, and again she received no replies. She began to panic. She grew desperate, Cooper said of Quinn's mother, so she left a voicemail threatening to call the state police if he did not respond to her. He called her back 2 minutes later, Cooper said. Acting surprised as if he had just discovered her motionless body, Gogolak told her Crystal was lying dead in his house from a Xanax pill she took. He placed that call at 5:25 p.m. "What are you calling me for? Call 911, the mother screamed, according to Cooper. In fact, Gogolak had already called 911 at 2:53 p.m., but hung up before a call taker could answer. When 911 called back, Gogolak did not answer the phone, Cooper said. Gogolak eventually called 911 at 6:23 p.m., 58 minutes after he told her mother she was dead. Around 7 p.m., a coroner found Quinn's body in full rigor mortis, indicating she'd been dead for between 12 and 24 hours, Cooper said. Gogolak tried to distance himself from her. Even as he alerted 911, he described himself as a neighbor, although she died in his house after spending 5 days with him. He also called her this girl who gave me and my buddies a ride home last night. Tuxedo, who was with attorney Peter M. Kushian, is defending Gogolak, called Gogolak's distancing himself a natural reaction to a terrible event. Distancing yourself does not equal distributing drugs that cause someone's death, Tuxedo said. He also cited the Juarez investigation in his opening statement, saying it shaped and colored the investigation into Gogolak by federal investigators who put blinders on as they focused on the witness tampering and retaliation motive that prosecutors abandoned. You're not going to like his actions, Tuxedo said, calling the 2023 version of Simon Gogolak a series of bad decisions and bad behavior as he struggled with his own drug addiction. She didn't deserve to die, he said of Quinn's death, but she was addicted to drug as well, he said. The government has to prove without a reasonable doubt that he caused a drug distribution that killed her, and there's no clarity to it, Tuxedo said. The long and short of it, you'll have reasonable doubt Mr. Gogolak distributed the drug that caused Crystal Quinn's death. Tuxedo told jurors that they would hear in coming weeks details of a tragic story. It's a story of fentanyl problem in western New York. Fentanyl is everywhere, and you'll hear about that in this trial, he added.
Well, in state news, a woman planned to bomb the Capitol building in Albany.
Good grief.
A woman who reportedly pledged allegiance to ISIS planned to unleash a terrorist bomb attack at the state capitol and massacre senators before her suspected plot was thwarted, federal prosecutors said on Thursday. Jessica Bowie, age 35 of Albany, whom prosecutors said adopted the name Aisha Saif, planned to then flee to ISIS-controlled territories after pulling off the terror plot, according to an affidavit filed by the FBI in criminal complaint in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of New York. "When I migrate, I will poison these infidels," Bowie, speaking in Arabic, told another person on social media on May 8th. The complaint described the sequence of events as follows. Between July 16th and at least August 17th, a confidential informant posing as a facilitator for ISIS communicated with Bowie, who reportedly discussed her plans to attack the Capitol, the seat of state government. Jihad is an obligation until the day of judgment to establish God's laws and enjoin good and forbid evil and fight until there is no fitna, Bowie reportedly said on July 16th. That same day, Bowie is accused of saying she would, quote, like to target my state capital, but ideally in a way I could get away with and hop on a plane afterwards, but I don't know if it's doable. Bowie reportedly told the informant she was less than 2 miles from the Capitol and planned to, quote, do something to benefit Ummah and harm the enemies of God. Bowie reportedly walked around the Capitol on 5 occasions between July 21st and August 9th. On August 5th, Bowie is accused of saying she wanted to bomb the Capitol and, quote, ideally do it when the most amount of senators are there and try to get a good enough explosive in there to kill the senators and ideally destroy as much of the building as possible. If successful, Bowie reportedly planned to return and unleash more terror, such as on New Year's Eve in Times Square in Manhattan. Bowie reportedly spent nearly half an hour in Home Depot collecting items to build an explosive device, which included nails. She reportedly planned to deliver it in a DoorDash bag. Bowie reportedly told another person that if her roommate found the device, she would need to kill the roommate. She was arrested on Wednesday after exiting the vehicle of an informant. Bowie was charged with attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terrorist organization. As alleged in the criminal complaint, Ms. Bowie swore her allegiance to ISIS and developed a detailed plan to attack the New York State Capitol and kill lawmakers and disrupt the government, said Craig Tremoroli, special agent in charge of the FBI's Albany field office. Make no mistake about it, Ms. Bowie's alleged plot was serious, it was dangerous, and thanks to the FBI's Albany Joint Terrorism Task Force, it was foiled. Let this investigation send a clear message that Albany FBI, together with our Joint Terrorism Task Force partners, will relentlessly investigate and arrest anyone supporting and conspiring with terrorists.
My goodness. On another note, Justin Sondel reports Good Food New York bill boosts small farms. Advocates and elected officials want Governor Kathy Hochul to sign a bill that they say would give public entities more opportunities to buy food from local farmers and food producers. Members of the Good Food Buffalo Coalition held an event at the Massachusetts Avenue Project to ask Hochul to support the latest version of Good Food New York, which passed both chambers of the state legislature this year. Hochul vetoed an earlier version in 2024. Good Food New York would allow public entities to purchase food based on factors other than price, which would allow entities such as public schools and hospitals to buy much more food from local producers. State procurement laws require public entities to award contracts to the lowest responsible bidder and generally do not allow other factors to be considered. The law, should Hochul sign it, would allow a list of other factors to be considered as long as the cost is not more than 10% above the price offered by the lowest bidder. Jessica Gilbert Overland, the co-founder of the coalition who has worked to bring the state legislation to life for years, said the bill would keep money in the local economy while also allowing public money to be spent in ways that would align with New Yorkers' values, and the legislation would build on other laws already in place that accomplish these goals, she added. The Good Food New York bill builds on these important initiatives, Gilbert Overland said. It expands the public institutions being encouraged to purchase New York state-produced food. It also expands the values that public institutions can prioritize by maintaining a focus on local and nutrition, but also emphasizing racial equity, environmental resilience, a valued workforce, a valued agricultural sector, and animal welfare. The bill was sponsored by Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes and State Senator April Baskin and passed with a wide majority in both houses. A Hochul spokesperson said the governor will review the bill. In her veto memo in 2024, Hochul raised concerns over whether the flexibility for how rules can be applied in different communities might cause issues for local producers trying to comply with state regulations. She also worried that some of the regulations laid out in that version of the bill would add too many onerous requirements for local farmers and producers to be successful. Gilbert Overland said the group continues to believe that the flexibility built into the bill is necessary to meet the needs of many diverse communities across the state. And the version that passed this year has features that will make it easier for farmers to comply with guidelines by streamlining approvals through other widely used state programs. If you compare the 2024 version with the 2026 version, you'll see that we've added several things to reflect our conversations with farmers, she said. Baskin said this bill would work with the many other laws and initiatives the state already has in place around food systems and access, including free lunches for public school students and the Fresh Communities Act.
Well, has a troubled Buffalo nursing home improved? A monitor says yes, but with caveats. Residents at the 200-bed Buffalo Center for Rehabilitation and Nursing are today served by more staff, more services, and more safety precautions than they were 3 years ago when its owner found itself on the receiving end of a major lawsuit from New York State Attorney General Letitia James. That's according to the final report from a court-appointed independent healthcare monitor, which has been working with 4 Centers Healthcare nursing homes, including the Buffalo Center, since July of 2023. The record compiled. Well, the screen just jumped here. The record compiled. That jumped again. Just a minute.
Want me to get it?
No, I got it. The record compiled reflects a substantial level of staffing investment, clinical engagement, resident satisfaction, and respect for resident rights, culture change, and management responsiveness, which did not happen by accident and is not likely to disappear once external oversight ends, the monitor wrote. Much work remains, however, as Buffalo Center still has an overall rating of 1 star or much below average on the federal Medicare Compare website, though the nursing home scores 3 stars or average on staffing. Further, in the last year, Buffalo Center has been issued state and federal fines totaling almost $160,000 related to violations of residents' rights, verbal abuse of residents, and unsanitary conditions. Buffalo Center is among the most fined nursing homes in Western New York over the last decade.
Well, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and it's now 15 minutes past the hour, and let's move on to sports. Yay! And shining bright is this article. Rousseau's impact shows potential of the Bills' new defensive scheme, and this is from Lance Lazowski. Every detail in Jim Leonhardt's playbook, each meeting with the Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator, addresses his players, and countless snaps in practice are designed with one objective in mind. In the biggest moments of games, Leonhardt wants the 11 players on the field to be ready to make a game-changing stop. There is no way of knowing which plays will define their season, Leonhardt reminds the Bills, so it's important to be detailed each time they step onto the field. In perhaps the biggest moment of their joint practice on Thursday against the Cleveland Browns, one of the Bills' potential game-playing players came through on that 3rd and goal during the 2-minute drill. Outside linebacker Greg Rousseau sliced through the Browns' offensive line right between right tackle Titus Howard and right guard Taven Jenkins to sack Shedeur Sanders. On the next play, Sanders threw an incomplete pass. Greg is one of the most physically gifted dudes out there, man, marveled Bradley Chubb, the veteran outside linebacker who will start opposite Rousseau and Leonhardt's defense. He's 6'8", 6'9", arms 100 inches. Him being able to use that to his advantage, I feel like it's going to take his game to the next level. Too often, former head coach Sean McDermott's defense failed in the biggest moments. In their last 6 playoff losses, Bills allowed an average of 33.16 points and 413.5 yards. Leonhardt was hired by first-year coach Joe Brady to install an aggressive 3-4 base defense that will shapeshift throughout a game from week to week. The goal is to make offenses adjust to Buffalo's defense instead of the other way around. Several players, including Chubb, were added this offseason to give Leonhardt the skill sets he needs, but he's also tasked with getting more out of the investments general manager and president of football operations Brandon Beane made into a defense that prevented the Bills from taking advantage of Josh Allen's clutch playoff moments. Skeptics say the Bills do not have the star power on defense for them to live the Lombardi Trophy in February, but aside from Browns edge rusher Jared Verse, no player on the practice field was as physically imposing or disruptive as Rousseau. Earlier in the 2-hour joint session, Rousseau beat Jennings with an outside move to force Sanders to step up the pocket. If the quarterbacks could be a hit, Chubb would have crushed Sanders. Rousseau almost came within a few inches of batting down a screen pass. For the Bills, it's not about 1 or 2 players either. On the line of scrimmage, despite the absence of defensive tackle Ed Oliver, the Bills were dominant at times. Landon Jackson and T.J. Sanders, second-year defense linemen, each had a tackle for loss in the red zone. Michael Holt, the veteran edge rusher returning from an Achilles tear, got onto the backfield on most of his snaps. Nobody talked louder or played more physically than Holt. This improved depth, especially in the front 7, showed. Caleb Elarms, or a rookie inside linebacker, got off to a run start to energize his sideline. Maxwell Hairston, who will need to hold off rookie Davison Igbinosun to start up opposite Christian Benford, broke up the pass to Denzel Boston. The Bills didn't have an inside linebacker, Terrell Bernhard, but two-time captain in drill teams, though he was in uniform. I'm excited about everything, Rousseau said. Not just me, though. I'm excited about the team. We got a good team. we're building something special. We just have to keep going and putting that work in. The joint practice was an imperfect data point for the Bills as they evaluated players' strengths and who will make their 53-man roster. Both coaches agreed to limit tackling players to the ground. Quarterbacks could not be hit. They didn't want fights either. Sure don't. Still, it was more useful than any preseason game because it is an opportunity to evaluate starters on offense and defense for 40 to 50 snaps against an opponent. Leonhard didn't dig too deep into his playbook, but he got to experiment with exotic blitzes and different personnel packages. The Bills weren't satisfied with the results. Deshaun Watson, who looks like the overwhelming favorite to be the Browns' starting quarterback, completed multiple deep passes to rookie wide receiver Casey Concepcion. Raheem Sanders, back up, getting more opportunities with starting runner back Quinton Judkins sidelined and turned a negative play into a 31-yard gain by reversing field during a 2-minute drill, and it began as a run toward the right sideline, but like Patriots running back Trey Van Henderson's 65-yard run against the Bills last season, multiple Buffalo defenders took a bad angle to the ball. Buffalo didn't have a turnover against Cleveland until second-year nickel cornerback Jordan Hancock intercepted Sanders in the red zone. The Bills' defensive players did not like how many first downs they gave up. A few blitzes did not create enough pressure, allowing Watson or Sanders to complete short passes to the middle of the field, and Boston caught a slant for a first down with Benford in coverage, extending a 2-minute drive that ended with the clock running out. Leonhard, who spent the past 2 seasons helping Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph turn Denver's secondary into arguably the NFL's best, will tinker with some coverages and emphasize specific technical hiccups while the Bills watch video from the joint practice.
Well, next we have Jay Skursky's column, and his headline is about the great performance of Dalton Kincaid at the combined practice. He says, Dalton Kincaid was almost too open. The Bills' tight end found himself running free during Thursday's joint practice with the Cleveland Browns. Quarterback Josh Allen delivered a perfect strike, and Kincaid held on for a long touchdown, the highlight of a spirited session between the Lake Erie neighbors that lasted just about 2 hours. Just a good day coming out and getting a new look defensively, going against some different guys, some new techniques, Kincaid said afterwards. We've been battling each other for the past few weeks. Good to finally see some new faces out there. The Browns' starting defense had no answers for Kincaid throughout the afternoon, including his long touchdown that came on the second play of a 2-minute drill sequence. That's probably the most open I've ever been in the NFL, Kincaid said. Probably was busted coverage. I almost dropped it, honestly. Over the summer, me and Josh ran a couple go routes, and he just kind of laughs when I run them. It kind of worked out today. It was a solid all-around day for the Bills' tight ends. Early during teamwork, Allen completed a pass down the left seam to Dawson Knox. The quarterback celebrated the play by pumping his arms. It went good to get out there, see a different defense. Guys were flying around, Allen said. Guys were stepping up. Obviously, at the receiver position, we've got some guys who are out. So it was good to see guys stepping up and make some plays. The tight ends, I thought, had a really good day. And that started with Kincaid, who's coming off 2 straight injury-plagued seasons, but has looked healthy throughout training camp. It's no secret we're a better offense when he's on the field for us, Allen said. He's been dealing with some things in the past. I feel like we're really clicking on the same page right now. Unofficially, Allen completed 17 of 22 passes during the practice. He had 1 pass knocked down at the line of scrimmage and was not intercepted. Kincaid had 4 receptions, 2 of which went for touchdowns. He's just so smooth out there. I feel like he's got a really good feel for the game, fellow tight end Jackson Hawes said of Kincaid. There's no wasted movement in what he does, and he's fast. He's really fast. But I mean, the thing about Dalton is he can block too. A lot of people just look at him as a receiving tight end, but he wants to block when he's asked to. You know, he's gritty. He's everything you want in a tight end.
Man, from Catherine Fitzgerald, this is a big one. Brady stresses no fights, and guess his wish. Sometimes Joe Brady acts like a cool uncle, but on Thursday ahead of the joint practice with the Cleveland Browns, he had to be a stern dad. Brady, you see, did not want the Buffalo Bills to get into fights. Look, it's hard, the Bills head coach said ahead of the practice. You go in front of the team meeting, you can say it, but there's still a mentality and a personality that you want guys to play with. It was a balance because Brady still wanted a competitive nature as the Bills gear up for the preseason game Saturday with the Browns. There might be guys talking a little bit, getting into each other's face, but when a punch is thrown, you see it later, Brady said. Like, we don't have time for that, and obviously I made that point across, but tempers flare, so there's got to be accountability and a discipline to what we do, but I also want the guys to have a mindset and a personality when they're on there as well. Fine lines. The fine lines came across to the Bills players who, for the most part, kept it clean. I mean, the shoves are okay, but the punches aren't, said tight end Jackson Hawes, who shoved Browns cornerback Trey Avery. Left guard Alec Anderson would have been a popular prop bet for the Bills player most likely to start a fight. Anderson laughed when he asked about the lack of fights Thursday, but he said the team was content to mostly jaw rather than physically fight. I think that's how you go into a game, Anderson said. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of emotions. This is our first time doing a joint practice this year. So you come up here like all jazzed up, ready to fire off the ball and hit another person in the face. And I think you kind of got to find that balance. Still, some players are expecting more fights to occur. I was definitely surprised, cornerback Christian Benford said. It's like everybody just remembered what Joe Brady said. Benford said that if he needed to predict ahead of practice who was most likely to fight, he would have picked either safety Sam Franklin Jr., who exchanged words with the Browns, or safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was not even practicing but still a candidate to fight. Yeah, even from the sideline, Benford said, I am surprised I ain't see it.
Well, in local college football news, UB's football quarterback competition remains unsettled as Pete Lembo shuffles his first-team reps. Quarterback Elijah Holmes worked with the University of Buffalo's first-team offense on Wednesday. However, outside of some familiar names on defense and the offensive linemen, Coach Pete Lembo was not ready to name starters at many positions, including quarterback, as he walked off the Broadview Stadium field following an afternoon practice session. Holmes, a senior transfer from Division II Wingate University, quarterbacked Buffalo's first team during the last hour of practice. Sophomore quarterback Jason Wright played with the second team, though Lembo said he has rotated his quarterbacks. A lot of the rest of the depth chart is very fluid right now, and we're being very intentional about moving twos in with ones, threes in with the twos, and vice versa, Lembo said. So our quarterbacks are going back and forth with different groups. We're mixing and matching offensive linemen. We're rotating in a lot of guys on the defensive line. Our linebacker depth is still solidifying itself, so there's a lot of moving parts there. Some observations. Do not expect Clint Walker to be used like a typical tight end. Walker, a 6'3", 240-pound fifth-year player, appeared to line up in UB's backfield as an H-back in some formations. Walker did not receive a carry, but it is not far-fetched to let him run. The Division II transfer earned 9 carries for 73 yards and scored a 27-yard rushing touchdown at Davenport last year. Last week, Buffalo's tight end coach Ron Whitcomb called Walker a twitchy athlete. Tight ends Michael Galatko and Trevor Wilson and T.J. Sabatucci also played with the first team, but they played more traditional roles on or near the line of scrimmage. At receiver, Josiah Gathings and Trance Morrow on the outside. Mark Anthony Scott played the slot, while Holmes took quarterback snaps. Terrence Shelton Jr. and Messiah Birch traded plays at running back with the first team. On the offensive line, Marco Cade, a 6'4", 295-pound freshman, played at least one possession as the center. Tommy Barr, a 6'3", 292-pound sophomore, has played center with the first team in previous practices but played right guard when Cade was the center. Senior Gabe Arena and Nathan Natoli, a fifth-year player, played left and right tackle respectively. Nino Francavilla, a 6'3", 300-pound junior, played left guard. Lembo expects Francavilla and Barr to start somewhere in the interior. On the defense, junior quarterback Colby Blackwell worked out individually while UB ran 11 on 11s. As Blackwell trained on the side, defensive coordinator Brian Dougherty used a variety of formations and personnel. One unit included returners Kenneth Bradley, Miles Greer, Savon Brown, Ronell Davis in the backfield. Sixth-year player Cornell Evans and sophomore Chris Climbs played beside each other at defensive tackle, and junior Will Clark and IUP transfer Logan Goodwin manned the edges.
Thank you. And you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and it's now 29 minutes past the hour, and we're going to move on to Asking Eric. That's our Eric Thomas, our advice giver. Siblings not planning to come to Mom's Centennial. Dear Eric, my mother turns 100 soon. I have 3 siblings who live in the same city 450 miles away. I live close to my mom and see her the most. I queried my siblings about the most convenient day to celebrate our mother's 100th birthday, and I got feedback, and I thought all had agreed to celebrate on her actual birthday. Several weeks later, I received a text from my older sister stating that the date would not work for her family, as several of her adult children have to work. This sister has never, in the 8 years my mom has been in the nursing home, visited her once. The other 2 siblings have visited her very occasionally. I'm very disappointed and disillusioned that we all can't be together to celebrate my mother, who would include a family photo. I was also discouraged I would be the only one responsible for the food, setting up the room, and the cleanup. The other 2 sisters have decided to come 2 days prior to celebrating a private party. They will be both leaving the following day. We are also having a public party inviting former neighbors and friends. Is it proper to ask them to share the cost of it? And it's signed, Lonely Celebrant. The answer is, Dear Celebrant, congratulations and happy birthday to your mother. You can absolutely ask your siblings to help you pay for the party. Now, they may protest if they weren't involved in the planning, but hopefully they see what you're doing is something is very nice for her and realize that helping foot the bill is the least they can do. This may not resolve your disappointment, however. It's important to remember that your expectations and theirs are going to be different. So while you wish they showed up for your mother more, for some reason they're not. You may also be feeling the stress of being near the de facto caregiver. You can't change their expectations of themselves, but you can be upfront about what you want or need. For instance, if you want a family photo, tell them that's very important to you and ask them to prioritize a visit, even though it won't be for the birthday. Dear Eric, I am not a big fan of receiving presents. Yay. They make me feel anxious, and I don't like everyone's eyes on me as I sit there opening things. My mother-in-law loves buying presents for people. I see the conflict already. Everyone at Christmas, adults, children alike, leave the house carrying one or more massive tote bags filled with various things. It's the same thing for birthdays, and she will even randomly just give us things because she saw it in passing and thought we might like it. Some of the things are very thoughtful, but a lot of it is just kitschy stuff, and I would never choose to buy for myself. I also simply don't have room for lots of stuff in my small apartment. My partner says his mom has always been like this, and I should just grin and bear it because it makes her happy. I think she feels sad. I think she feels I'll be sad if I don't get the same number of items as everyone else. I want her to know I will not be offended if I receive a few things while others receive more. I'd much rather watch everyone else have fun opening their gifts over opening a gift for myself. How do I tell her this without making it seem like I don't appreciate the gesture? As signed, no gifts, please. Dear Gifts, an inveterate gift giver might appreciate suggestions for the kinds of gifts one wants to receive, even if that suggestion is no gift at all. So talk to her about how it makes you happy to watch everyone else open gifts. Tell her you appreciate her efforts, but it would really make you more comfortable not to be the center of attention at a big group event opening a gift. Now, I'm almost certain this will not stop the flow of gifts in your direction completely, but if she's able to pull back on some of the more public displays, you may find other gifts less anxiety-producing. You can't force her to change, but you can reframe some of the gift giving so it makes you less anxious. Talking will help with that. Remember, you're not critiquing her or telling her to stop. You're just making a request for an adjustment. Also, focus on your own gratitude for the relationship and the gesture. You don't have to want the gift in order to be glad you have someone thinking of you. You might also remind yourself that gifts you don't want can be donated or regifted, leaving you with only the sentiment, which is the most important thing. In my family, we all give food gifts now.
Sounds good.
Oh, that's great.
Well, our next story is headlined, Returning to the Nest, Millions of Young Adults Are Living with Their Parents for Financial Reasons. Ariana Hernandez is 22, but her list of recent trips reads like the itinerary of a wealthy boomer. Austria and Italy, Costa Rica and Guatemala, Hawaii and the Virgin Islands. Friends joined her on some trips, and here's how they can afford it. All of them live in their parents' homes. A lot of my closer girlfriends, we all live with our parents, and we like to take trips, Hernandez said, and we can kind of do that because we live with our parents. A record number of young adults are choosing to live with their parents rather than contemplate the tricky math of renting or owning homes. About half of recent college graduates return to parents' homes after finishing their studies rather than move out on their own, according to a new survey from Clever Real Estate. More than 25 million adults under age 35 lived with their parents in 2025, according to a June report from Realtor.com that draws on census data. That's the highest number on record, including the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which sent millions of younger Americans back to the parental nest. Hernandez left college last year and joined her parents in their Dallas home. She's finishing her studies in a self-paced program and working full-time as a social media influencer. She posts on TikTok about her home life and travels. In returning home, Hernandez said her reasoning is essentially this: well, if I live with my parents, I could take what I would spend on rent every month and take a trip. The best part about living with her parents? I rarely shop, she said. My parents always have food ready. Also, I go on date nights and bring back food. The negatives? Space is tight. Hernandez does not share her parents' interior design sensibilities, and it's a 45-minute drive downtown in traffic. Still, Hernandez senses that living with one's parents has been super normalized. I would be surprised to see a friend kind of moving out on their own when they do have a good relationship with their parents, she said. It would almost make no sense to go and get an apartment by yourself. The Clever survey found that half of recent college graduates still rely on parents for financial support. 1/4 of recent grads say parents pay all their bills.
Oh, good grief.
The survey, conducted in June, reached 564 current graduates, with 436 graduates who earned degrees in the past 5 years. Despite the benefits, young adults have mixed feelings about cohabiting with their parents. Only 7% of current students surveyed said they want to move back into childhood homes, but 49% of recent graduates said they wound up there. When you live with your parents, it can be harder to feel like you can establish your independence in the world, said Clara Haverstick, an analyst at Clever. At the peak of the pandemic, demographic experts say young adults retreated to their parents' homes to ride out the quarantine and escape big city crowds. Now, young adults are returning to child homes or remaining there mostly because of the cost. The median home is listed for $430,000 according to Realtor.com, and that's 34% higher than home prices in 2019. The median asking rent is $1,673, an 18% increase. We're told the mark of being a successful adult is owning a home, and the reality is that owning a home is incredibly hard to achieve, especially for a recent graduate, Haverstick said. Over the past decade, home prices rose much faster than wages. The rising price to income ratio, coupled with elevated interest rates, put home ownership out of reach for millions of young adults. But some young adults return home for reasons more emotional than financial. Not long after college, Haverstick, age 25, moved back to her parents' family farm in southwest Missouri. Her goal was to spend more time with her grandmother who lived in an adjoining home. It was just the little things, like having coffee with her in the morning sometimes, Haverstick said. She really liked going into town for dinner. They watched football together. Clara's grandmother, Karen Haverstick, died last October. It was sort of important to be there when it mattered, she said. Well, I'll tell you, when my daughter graduated from college, she was home for exactly 1 week till she moved down to New York City for a job and her own apartment.
Yeah, I moved right out, man. I was happy to get out. I don't know. And I love my parents, but I wanted to be out on my own.
Get on with life.
I don't understand that, but whatever. Can you ace this test? This is a Senior Health article from Ann Gregis of USA Today. Brain fitness tests are screening tools for early detection of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Combining these conditions kill 1 in 3 older Americans, according to the Alzheimer's Association. The way the diseases touches so many people is due in part to medicine's success in fighting other diseases, like cancer and heart disease, for example. In the past, these diseases killed people before they had a chance to develop dementia. The number of Americans diagnosed with dementia will double from 500,000 that it had in 2021 to 1 million people annually in 2060, due in part because the number of people older than 90 is expected to grow to 9 million Americans by 2050. That's almost quintupling from the 1.9 million of them counted in 2010, according to a 2025 report from the U.S. Census Bureau commissioned by the National Institute on Aging and the National Institutes of Health. People are becoming more aware of the importance of brain health because of older adults, said Catherine Price, a professor in the clinical and health psychology department at the University of Florida. I think that changes in cognition and memory are becoming more pertinent to society. Starting in 2019, the American College of Surgeons launched a standard recommended practice that anyone 65 or older going in for surgery should get a mini-cog test, Price said. That's a snapshot about how that person is doing before surgery, Price said of the assessment that involves repeating 3 words in the order given and drawing a normal clock with hands and numbers. If something does come up for that person after the surgery, at least we have a baseline for that person. This has been shown over and over again to be extremely important. Researchers at Florida Atlantic University are developing a cognitive test combining aspects of other tests correlated to the patient's driving skills. Study participants are completing paper and pencil tests and then taking a road test to see how they perform on tests predicting driving fitness. Here are some of the most well-known cognitive tests. The first being the clock drawing cognitive test. One of the oldest asked a patient to draw a clock in 3 minutes. Size, roundness of the face, proportion of the numbers of the face, and arms give clue to how the brain behind the pencil is doing. It has comprehension. There are semantics. There's planning, and there's visual construction. There's working memory, Price says of the skills the clock drawing test offers clues into. Every single one of those things is involved in doing that. Brain scientists say time may be running out on this test, which is believed to have debuted during World War I, testing soldiers who suffered head injuries. It's already not effective in testing some patients who come in with concussions, for example. The next generation isn't going to be as familiar as we are with the clock, says Julie Matura, a speech-language pathologist and certified brain injury specialist who teaches at the University of Central Florida. They didn't use it growing up, so I do believe it's going to be irrelevant. What the replacement is, I have no idea. That is relevant. My younger sister teaches children, and when they banned the cell phones in her school, they didn't know how to read a wall clock. She had to teach them. The second test is a Montreal Cognitive Assessment. This 30-question test takes about 10 minutes to complete. Is considered the gold standard. In addition to drawing a clock, it asks a test taker to identify different animals and repeat 5 words immediately and then later in the test. The self-administrative gerocognitive exam was developed at Ohio State University. It asks the test taker to perform tasks like drawing shapes and lines from 1 to A and then 2 to B and so on in 15 minutes. This assessment is then taken to a primary care doctor to be scored, And online and artificial intelligence powered tests like AARP, NeuroX, and Memtrax offer immediate feedback to scrollers looking for information about their brain health. Matura has some cautions on those, however. What I'm concerned about is taking online cognitive tests and then someone trying to sell you a supplement or trying to sell you a program that's going to help your brain health, Matura said. It's not to say that there's something nefarious, but I'm concerned that could be an easy way to get it to people who are vulnerable. And boy, I'll tell you, that's out there.
Yes, it is. Well, our next story continues in health, and it's titled Pumping Problems, a closer look at heart failure and the terms doctors use to describe this common condition. The term heart failure sounds ominous, as though the heart has stopped working altogether, but that's not the case. Rather, heart failure refers to a group of conditions that weaken or stiffen the heart, leaving it unable to pump or fill with blood effectively. Like most health conditions, heart failure occurs on a spectrum, and stages range from mild to severe. Our understanding of heart failure and how to treat it has improved dramatically in the last few decades, says Dr. Darrell Lee Lewis, cardiologist and assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. In the 1970s, only about a third of people diagnosed with heart failure survived 5 years. Today, 5-year survival rates exceed 60%, she says. Many terms are associated with heart failure. For example, an older term, congestive heart failure, refers to an abnormal buildup of fluid, a hallmark of heart failure. Fluid often accumulates in the lungs, leading to shortness of breath, and in the abdomen or legs, causing them to swell. But some people do not experience fluid buildup. Instead, they develop symptoms such as fatigue, weakness, and a limited ability to exercise. Therefore, the name heart failure is generally preferred over congestive heart failure. There are certain different types of heart failure, and most cases of heart failure arise from problems with the left ventricle, the heart's main pumping chamber. Called left-sided heart failure, it falls into two main categories, systolic and diastolic. In systolic heart failure, also known as heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, the left ventricle becomes weak and can't squeeze effectively. People with this experience low blood pressure, fatigue, fainting, and shortness of breath, and the inability to exercise. In diastolic heart failure, also known as heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, the left ventricle becomes stiff and thick. Pressures rise inside the ventricles, causing fluid to back up into the lungs and other parts of the body. People with this condition may experience shortness of breath with exertion or when lying flat. Right-sided heart failure, the screen jumped again. Right-sided heart failure, weakening or stiffening on the right ventricle, is less common and usually less dangerous than left ventricular failure. The right ventricle receives blood from the veins of the body and pumps it to the lungs where it picks up oxygen. When the right ventricle is unable to squeeze or relax normally, the increased pressure in the right ventricle can cause fluid to build up in the legs and abdomen. Heart failure is defined by 4 stages which progress over time. Stage A is being at risk for heart failure. This includes people who have normal heart structure but have risk factors for heart failure including high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, diabetes, obesity, or exposure to harmful substances such as excess alcohol or cocaine, as well as those at risk for cardiomyopathy because of family history or known genetic variants. Stage B is pre-heart failure. This includes people who have structural changes in their heart, such as a slightly enlarged left ventricle, reduced pumping fraction, or a heart valve problem as seen on a heart ultrasound, but have not shown any symptoms of heart failure. Stage C is symptomatic heart failure. This includes people with current or previous symptoms of heart failure. And finally, Stage D, advanced heart failure. This includes people with debilitating symptoms that affect their daily function or require hospitalization. People with stages A or B heart failure should focus on treating their underlying risks through lifestyle changes and medications to keep the problem from worsening. Those with stages C or D are further divided into different classes that reflect the severity of their disease. Treatment focuses on medications and lifestyle changes to ease symptoms, improve quality of life, and prevent hospitalization. Many people with heart failure are surprised by the number of medicines we prescribe, but each has an important job, and they work together to prolong survival and prevent hospitalizations, Lee Lewis says. When I was in training, a heart failure diagnosis was worse than a diagnosis of cancer. Now, thanks to these medications, many people can lead active, healthy lives for decades after their diagnosis.
Thank you. And we're going to read my view now. This is from Lori Duval Jackson, who always has a good story. She learned some good skills in the summertime. Summer camp skills can come in handy. Sunrise on a mountainside, grass against my face. Everything seems infinite. Time and land and space. I wrote those words almost 50 years ago after summiting a peak in the Adirondacks. Mountain and staying overnight. I awoke to sore muscles and an otherworldly view, such as the Fulton chain of lakes as they shimmered through the landscape below like a sapphire necklace. In the ensuing days, I rented a small motorboat from a livery and took it through those lakes, sleeping overnight on small islands. I later backpacked to the High Peaks area and camped on the grounds of Tahossus, an abandoned settlement given back to nature. I was never again to be as alone or as free as I was then, with only the forest and its creatures surrounding me. It was a privilege ingrained in me the knowledge we humans are part of nature despite having largely removed ourselves from it. I was a suburban kid whose family didn't camp. The mere thought of my glamorous mother sleeping on a bag on the ground was hilarious. The closest we came to the great outdoors was driving past a park, yet a love of nature found me and never left. It began at Camp Centerland, run by the Jewish Community Center of Greater Buffalo, a day camp I attended every summer for years while growing up. It was located near the intersection of Bowen and Bullis Roads in Elma and offered everything not experienced in the suburbs: woods, hills, streams, and fields. There was a central area with an old mansionette service and administration building, 2 pools, a barn, and a dining hall. Scattered throughout the grounds were basic cabins, outhouses, and huts for sporting, nature, and craft activities. Areas were connected by gravel roads and small bridges, but more often by footpaths through the woods and streams we forded using fallen trees. Boy, I want to go there. While the camp emphasized Jewish cultural activities, it was also introduced as a generation of city and suburban kids to nature. The oldest groups went on 5-day camping trips twice each summer. I learned how to pitch a tent, which I did for the first time in the pouring rain at Allegheny State Park, after being instructed to dig a trench around it. Some kids wandered off days later, necessitating a search that ended hours later, and I always remembered to mark my trail after that. I never learned to wade barefoot after a leech attached itself to my foot. We were taught how to start a fire without matches or a lighter, a universal skill I saw practiced decades later by a Maasai tribesman in Kenya. I grew adept at crunching down the bulky sleeping bag, something that proved invaluable years later when I carried a much lighter version on my backpack frame. Thanks to those summer camping experiences, I felt confident about setting off into the Adirondacks with a lightweight frame carrying my sleeping bag, a tarp used in lieu of a tent, some clothing, and other supplies. I never worried about ticks, which weren't even in my vocabulary back then. Black flies and mosquitoes were a nuisance, but accepted at the price paid for being in the woods. It's been years since I visited the Adirondacks, and I mostly just take day hikes now, but my respect for the natural world will always remain. Boy, I used to love taking vacations by myself, and I would go to the Southwest and disappear
Well, I'll tell you.
into canyons. And
I hated camping. My son was a Boy Scout, and once a year there would be a camp out that they would go to Letchworth State Park in October.
Ooh.
And that was a good time to go because the leaves were nice and it wasn't too cold at night. But camping is not for me. Well, we'll end with this. Harry and Meghan are going back to the Lion's Den after 6 years in the United States. A year after he and his wife Meghan announced that they were stepping down from royal duties, Prince Harry said the shock move had been driven in part by the actions of a toxic British press which was destroying his mental health. I did what any father or husband would do and thought, how do I get my family out of here, he said in a 2021 interview on The Late Late Show with James Corden. 6 years after that decision to move to the U.S., which sent shockwaves through the monarchy, Harry, 41, and Meghan, 45, will this month return to Britain, where they will send their children to school. And that will mean returning to the media scrutiny that they had desperately sought to leave behind. Look, there's no doubt the British press and the British media are going to try and follow their every move, royal commentator Afua Hagen told Reuters. Perhaps they're walking back into the lion's den, but they're walking back into the lion's den prepared. They're not bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Well,
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Friday, August 21st. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
J.J. Patek.
and Ed Howard, and we thank you for listening.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.